Hello, I'm Lord Stockton. I'm helping to organise and fronting David Amess's virtual book tour. Great deal more comfortable than real book tours, which as a publisher I know all about. David is a wonderful man, and he is the living embodiment of what is good about politics and Parliament. David went into politics not because he wanted to become rich or famous or even notorious, but because he wanted to help people. And he believed that the best way he could help them was to be their representative on the council, in the constituency, and in the nation at large. He has always done this with only the very best intentions. As a result, he is admired and is a friend of almost everyone, even the civil servants who he badgers endlessly about Southend becoming a city. They admire him, albeit a little ruefully. I don't think that there's anyone in politics today who is as straightforward and as honourable as David is. Finally, I think all I can say is that I am very fond of David, and I'm very proud to be able to call him my friend.
Next month, a book which I have written called Eyes and Ears, A Survivor's Guide to Westminster, will be published, part of which covers Brexit. And yes, by inference, everyone will be in the book. Would my right honourable friend agree with me that the last general election was not fought on how political parties might handle the coronavirus pandemic, but was categorically about ensuring that the result of the 2016 referendum was implemented in full? Will my right honourable friend confirm that that is what he intends to see happen?
Prime Minister. I can indeed, Mr. Speaker, and I congratulate my right honourable friend on his new book.
And if you were to read his excellent book, Madam Deputy Speaker, Eyes and Ears, probably available in all good bookshops, you would be aware that he is the proud patron of the Conservative Animal Welfare Foundation and has devoted much of his life to campaigning on behalf of our furry friends.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this event. Thank you for joining. If at the end of my being interviewed you would like to ask me any questions, please put those questions in the live chat section. And if you would like to purchase the book, there is a link that you can find below. So please go to that. You can get the book from Ian Dale at Politicos. You can get it from Amazon. You can also get it direct from Lueth, the publishers. But finally, you could also get it directly from myself. I've got a number of my books in the House of Commons, and through your own Member of Parliament, if you tell them that you would like the book, I'm sure they'd be only too pleased to collect them directly from my office in the House of Commons. I hope you enjoy the evening.
Well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. And tonight I'm delighted to be with two of my colleagues, one from Cheshire and one from Staffordshire. Now, they're not only colleagues, but they're good friends. Yeah. And Fiona is going to sort of be the Oprah Winfrey of the evening, and Bill is going to be the Michael Parkinson of the evening. And if you didn't know already, it's to promote this book that I've written. It's called Eyes and Ears, A Survivor's Guide to Westminster. And any profits go to 3 charities, which at the end of the evening, my two colleagues are going to mention. But before they start interviewing me, I want to say something. Bill Cash, who had a birthday this week, you are a legend. You were elected shortly after I was elected to Parliament, so we've got exactly the same experiences. But I'm one of the very, very few people who can say, without you, my friend, Brexit would never have happened. And I remember, Bill, in those early days, when some people might have panned you as the Commons boy, he's always going on about Brexit, just like Teddy Taylor. and they would smile. It's all for the birds. You stuck with it, Bill. And I just do not think that you've been given, okay, it was David Cameron who gave us that referendum, but I don't think you've been the credit that you deserve, frankly. So I want to applaud you for everything that you did to make Brexit happen. And at the same time, Fiona, I want to just point out to our viewers this evening that you're not only a wonderful woman, but you are one of our envoys. And in that role, you do an absolutely fabulous job in raising all issues to do with religious freedoms and other matters. And the final thing I would like to say to both of you, I hope this doesn't offend any of our viewers this evening, but you're both what I would call pro-life members of Parliament. Absolutely. You both think that life in all its forms should be protected. So I want to thank both of you being with me this evening. Now, who would like to start the questioning?
Well, I think I'll have a shot first of all. What I'd like to know is what you think about the manner in which Parliament has changed over the years since we came in together, because you're 83 and I was about 6 months later or so, which was May 1984 in a by-election. But of course, Margaret Thatcher was the Prime Minister at the time. And I make no bones about it, I am an absolutely fervent Thatcherite and always have been and will remain so for the rest of my life. I got to know her extremely well personally. She came and stayed with us from where I'm speaking now, actually. And we went on holiday together and so on. But what I do think is that everything that you stand for, David, and what you've achieved in your constituency and in your campaigns, and Fiona too, actually, for me at any rate, contains that element of continuity from those days. So I just wanted to ask you what you think about the manner in which we've now got Boris Johnson in power, and before that we had Thatcher with what I could describe as an awful lot in between. What do you think?
Well, Bill, the reason I particularly wanted you to interview me is there's only a handful of people left in Parliament who've been there as long as you and I. I mean, I'm number 7 in the terms of seniority. There's Peter Bottomley. I didn't know that Edward Lee was standing in the queue in front of me. If I'd known how important it was, I would have pushed him out the way and would have signed the book before.
I'm just behind you.
Yeah. And you know who was standing in front of me, Bill? Jeremy Corbyn. Really? And if you had told me that he'd have been leader of the Labour Party. And I also think, Bill, what a privilege and how lucky we were to be in the House of Commons when Margaret was our leader, when she was at the peak of our powers, because the overwhelming majority of our colleagues didn't know her, weren't there when she was our leader, and met her, sadly, when her health had deteriorated. So when I say to you that I think the House of Commons has changed, oh dear, this isn't going to please everyone. I don't think it's necessarily changed for the better. That's my view. So the first thing that's changed is members of Parliament have. You and I know, Bill, that when we were first elected, there weren't many ladies. There are lots of ladies now, which I actually welcome. But when we were first elected, of course, on our side, the ladies mainly wore hats, pinafore dresses and all of that. Now, Fiona not, but of course, for ladies to wear trousers, absolutely sensational. It never happened. And of course, we chaps, there are so many young MPs now. I'm staggered that half of them are old enough to vote, but I assume they are. But certainly there are many, many young MPs. And then the type of MP has changed. I mean, you know, Bill, in those early days, we had people from all sorts of backgrounds, but a number of them had 2 jobs. And there was nothing wrong with that, because we used to work Monday to Thursday to 2:30 until 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning. And we were always there on a Friday between 9:30 and 3 o'clock. Well, all of that has changed completely. And now we have a number of MPs, and I don't want anyone to be upset at it, but some of them, I don't think they've had what I call real jobs. They seem to be like professional party warriors on both sides. You know, I can't believe the number of colleagues who find that people who work for them are now MPs.
Well, I'll tell you this, David, if I may, just to butt in on that very issue. As you know, I was Shadow Attorney General for a time.
You were, under Ian.
I have a background as constitutional law and all the sovereignty that goes with that since. But my experience was developed in the years when I was actually first qualified as a lawyer in 1967.
Absolutely.
And I didn't come into Parliament until 1984. So actually, I was 43 when I came in.
Yeah.
I admit that I'm still here at the age of 81 today.
You're remarkable.
But the bottom line is that what you've just said is so true. And it's not to criticize people because they can't be what they're not, but to have some real experience at the wall, the granite wall of real work outside. And certainly in my case, I was doing things like advising Quebec back in the 1980s, in the early 1980s, before I got in the Houses of Parliament. I won't go into it all, but I had a lot of what I call top line experience, which has been very, very important and helpful to me in understanding the problems that we've been experiencing over the European Union.
Well, you've made your point far better than I could have, Bill, but I do think that experience is very important. And you and I know the House of Commons is dead to what it used to be. And it's not because of the coronavirus pandemic, but when you and I made our maiden speeches, the chamber was packed. I remember making it on the rate capping bill after Ted Heath. You couldn't get a seat, and it wasn't to listen to David Amos, but the chamber was absolutely packed. Well, now it's only full for Prime Minister's question time, which is absolute rubbish to what it used to be. We used to have it on a Tuesday for 15 minutes and on a Thursday for 15 minutes. Far, far better than it was now. And I think the power of oratory has gone completely. So, yeah, but I mean, I could go on and on about it, Bill. I know we live in a different world. When you and I were elected, our secretaries had golf ball typewriters. We didn't have the internet computers. And I realized we have to get modern. But because we've experienced different things, I think it is a shame. I mean, look, even filibustering. One or two of our colleagues, Ivan Lawrence, spoke on the water fluidization bill for 5 hours. You know,
I did 2.5 on the Maastricht second reading.
There we go. There we go. And it was wonderful, entertaining. And I think once we televised our proceedings, and we've all got the TVs in our rooms now, you don't have to bother to go to the chamber. I mean, just sit there and watch the whole thing. So, yeah, there have been many, many changes. I don't salute them all, but I do think what has happened in the most recent elections since 2019, talking about our party now, Bill and Fiona, that our image, Conservatives just being in favour of wealth, rich people and posh people, well, that's changed completely. I mean, with our new colleagues elected, they're sort of vying for who's lower in the gutter. Unbelievable. but Fiona, you haven't been an MP quite as long as myself and Bill is concerned.
Well, hello, David. It's good to be with you, and Bill. No, I'm a mere fledgling. I've only been in the House 11 years, so I'm enjoying this conversation. You're making me feel very young and sprightly. But David, it's always lovely to talk with you. You're a colleague who brings a smile to the face, whether we see you in the corridors or when you're speaking, calling for Southend to be a city. We enjoy your fellowship in the House of Commons. What I'd like to ask you about is electioneering. because we've just come through a period of election time, and it's funny. I remember several years ago reading the diaries of Chips Channon, who was one of your predecessors, and he said going through an election is like going through a love affair. You know, it's exhausting, it's exhilarating, it's unpredictable. It can be disappointing or not, as the case may be. And certainly we've seen a lot of that very recently here through the recent elections. But in your book, you talk about what is important about electioneering, and you say, well, apart from the candidate having to be leading from the front and being positive, you say you need to knock on as many doors as possible. You need to have plenty of posters and lots of razzmatazz. Well, what's razzmatazz in your definition? That's what I'd like to know. Can you sing your signature tune, or at least can you tell us something of it? Apparently you've used the same tune with a mobile surgery motorhome, rather conjures up pictures of an ice cream van. I think what Anne Whittingham has one, isn't she? Did she call it her boatmobile? So tell us all about your campaigning with razzmatazz.
Well, I think, Fiona, that elections should be fun. And I'm not saying that we should go the American way, which is completely over the top, really, but I like lively election campaigns. And I feel that elections have sort of become more sterile, a little bit like our party conferences. Our party conferences used to be wonderful. We'd stand up, we'd be on the edge of our seats listening to the oratory. Now, the people at party conferences, they're sitting on chairs, they're having a dialogue. Oh, they bore me silly, terrible. I want to get back and fight for something, just as we did over Brexit. So, yeah, I mean, Fiona, look, I have been playing the same tune now ever since 1983. And it's called Vote, Vote, Vote for David Amess. If you want to be true and to end your points of view, then David Amess is the only man for you. And it sort of goes over and over on a loop thing. And really, I mean, Bill knows what I'm talking about. Going back to Margaret's first election victory, do you remember Rod Stewart, Maggie May, and all of that? Yeah. And it was fabulous. We used to have sort of this fun and excitement. So going back to my first general election in 1979 in the London Borough of Newham, that elected the first Labour Member of Parliament ever, Keir Hardie, I wasn't daunted by the fact that there'd only ever been a Labour MP, forget Hartlepool, and there'd never ever been a Conservative councillor for donkey's years. I got up sort of a whole crowd of floats with Miss Bluebell in the front float, which of course will be very politically incorrect, and we went down with a tune blasting the people of Newham, which looked at anyway, it was great. So what I did, when we won Basildon, which believe it or not has got a bit of a rural bit, I thought our family were young then. We had a second-hand motorhome, which we used. And I suddenly thought, well, okay, I'll put 2 wooden flaps on the top of the motorhome, which when it wasn't being used as a motorhome could flip up and say David Amess Mobile Surgery. And that's what we used to do. And during the only thing I'm ever going to be remembered for when I'm dead will be the 30 seconds when I became famous for retaining the seat in 1992. But you name it, every single person that the 3 of us would think was famous, and some of the viewers would as well, had been in that motorhome. And whether it be Norman Tebbit, Margaret Thatcher, Douglas Hurd, they'd all been in the motorhome. And look, when you mentioned Chip Channon's diaries. Are you aware, Fiona, that the unredacted version came out 3 weeks ago?
I am, yes.
Well, what shelters lives the 3 of us have led. Oh, dear, oh dear. Absolutely extraordinary goings on there.
I'm not sure I approve of all of it, but that's another story.
I know. Well, I rather agree with you, Bill. But you know, the South and West are represented by the Guinness family for 100 years, and then they get me.
For 100 years.
The Guinness family didn't campaign with all this.
Fantastic job, David.
Well, I don't know about that, Bill. I've done my best. But so I brought razzmatazz to Southend West, which they were shocked by. And yes, I still play the campaign signature tune, and it does sound like an ice cream van. But anyway, look, and the final thing I would say, I love election programs. I really do. So when Mr. Day would interview people, Robin Day, that was fabulous. And when the Dimblebees were performing, now it's absolutely pathetic. And the interviews didn't have the agenda that they had now. I mean, it's absolutely extraordinary the way they've got a script. Oh, it suddenly goes wrong. We'll change the interview. Oh, and I used to like the swingometer.
Oh, yes.
All of those things.
The other thing now, David, is I think that there is a problem with regard to the manner in which the media as a whole, I'm talking about visual and broadcast media, they have very strong opinions of their own. And a lot of the problem about having bias is what worries me. There's too much bias on the media at the top end, and they orchestrate the manner in which they choose the people to go on and the questions they ask, and the lack of impartiality, which is against the rules of the charter of the BBC, troubles me a great deal. We don't need to go into all that, but I think that's become a real problem. In those days, it didn't exist.
I agree with you completely. I'm in a dialogue now with the new Director General because, Fiona, I was horrified. I'm not going to mention them. 2 BBC breakfast presenters interviewed Robert Jenrick. Now, all Secretaries of State have got a picture of the Queen behind them and the Union Jack. That's part of the job. And they started to take the mickey on Twitter afterwards. I mean, this is not acceptable. And it's all right, the Director General posting something on his website. That is not good enough. And they're overpaid beyond belief. But I'll shut up. Bill, what's troubling you next?
Well, I think basically what I'd like to ask you about is how you found the whole of the development of our position, which is exactly contemporaneous with the time when you came in to the time we're in now, not just on the question of the behavior of members of parliament and things like that, but where you think and what you think led to the people of this country not just producing Boris Johnson, which is very significant this last year, but the whole transformation of the Brexit question from, if I may say, the Maastricht Rebellion back in those early days, which you can remember, and the incredible reaction that people had, as you quite rightly say, they'd say, oh, boring, boring, you know, but my goodness, they knew what was going on. And I just put it to you as a starter, because I'd like to hear your views on this, that one of the things that struck me when I set up the Maastricht referendum campaign was that this was about the apex of power. It was about who governs this country. And the sellout on Maastricht was basically the fact that the government was prepared to go along with the idea of European government. So I put down hundreds of amendments and so on and so forth, and we led this Maastricht referendum campaign, which I'm sure you can remember.
Okay.
And the bottom line on it is that we've now got a complete change in attitudes, as we saw in the red wall seats up in the northeast only a couple of days ago, with the Hartlepool seat, which is definitely to do with Brexit. And the reality is that we would never have been able to get the vaccines for COVID, which is the other side of the massive equation that Boris has delivered, unless we'd got out of Brexit, because they'd never have allowed us to do the vaccine program the way we've done it. And it's now a world beater. So looking back, I'd just like you to, as you say, without our both banging on about Europe, just to reflect on what it was that led to the fact that the Conservative Party went through this change from 1983-84. Then we got the Single European Act. Do you know something? I was actually, I put down an amendment, which I discussed with Margaret, that nothing in this Act of Parliament will affect the sovereignty of the United Kingdom Parliament. Do you know I wasn't even allowed to debate it?
No.
Combination of the clerks and the chief whip and the chairman of Ways and Means and the deputy, they actually stopped me and I objected. So what I'm saying to you is there's been a massive change. We've now got sovereignty and a deal under Boris.
Absolutely. But Bill, I dodged the question, by the way, when you, in your first question, you asked me about going from Margaret Thatcher to Boris Johnson. Look, my friend, I'm a traditionalist. Did I ever think that someone like Boris Johnson would become leader of our party and prime minister? Absolutely no way. I mean, I'd seen him on Have I Got News From You? And there's a picture hanging in my room now. I once did the Oxford Union debate with Norman Lamont. He was one of the also runs and all this, and now he's sort of prime minister with an 80-seat majority. So times have changed, and whatever anyone thinks of Boris Johnson, the way he lives his life, the way he has or doesn't have his hair cut, and all things like that, the population just seem to actually love him. So
David, I was only going to say this. I've known Boris since he was, because I knew Stanley, his father. We were at Oxford together in the late 1950s, early 60s.
Yeah.
And I got to know Boris when he was the Daily Telegraph correspondent. And I'm going to say something because other people have got their own view about this, and I'm quite clear. He's always understood the European question.
Yeah.
He's always understood. And if you, for those who are watching this program, if they ever get the chance not only to read your book, but also the Churchill Factor.
Oh, yes.
Boris.
Yeah, his book.
A whole chapter which tells you why he, at the time he wrote it, which is about 10 years ago, was already quite clear in his mind that we couldn't tolerate going on down this European road of more and more European integration and more European government. And he understood it. So the great advantage of Boris, to my mind, in a nutshell, is that whereas he has this folksy, extremely sort of engaging personality with some of the things that people will criticize him for, he's a real person and people understand it. And actually combined with that, he's got this incredible strategic mind. So it's a very intelligent, very, very engaging personality. And I think the combination of those two things is something, and that's something he's got, which Margaret perhaps did not have so much, because she wasn't so much a person of the people as Boris is.
No, well, these are brilliant points you make. Look, everyone's a sinner. I'm not sure Fiona is, but everyone is a sinner, and Boris is. And the general public do relate to him. But I'm going to say something else, because you're not going to blow your trumpet. As members of Parliament, we can't specialise in everything. Fiona is specialising in religious freedom, and she's picked out something which I think is so important. It's just not national, it's international, and she's making a great name for herself in that regard. You, Bill, specialised in one subject, and you are an example, because look, I don't think in future there will be MPs who will have been there for 40 years. If you look at it, the average MP term is about 8 years, something like that. And it seems to be, with the turnover and all these Labour MPs becoming metro mayors and throwing the towel in pretty quickly, it seems to be shorter and shorter. But you're an example of how you've got to stick at something. And you've got to be consistent. And this is where I am with the European issue. I'd worked it out for myself, Bill. That's why I was never enamoured by Ted Heath. And although I wasn't an MP in the first referendum, I obviously could vote for it. And I thought that going back to when Macmillan wanted us to join and de Gaulle told us what to do, I think the story of our membership of the European Union would have been different if we could have joined at the outset. But we were always on the back foot, really. And of course, when you and I were in Parliament, there's no question at all that our sovereignty was just, well, it was just being lost. More and more powers being lost. Now, I know, Bill, and Fiona wasn't there at the time, but I know that you and John Major had your run-ins. Let's put it like,
yeah, completely
like that. Well, yeah. But, you know, John came, he left school at 16, had a very ordinary background, and I think he did a great job in certain respects. I will never understand, Bill, why he went to the war on the issues that he did with Europe. And it was just awful what went. I mean, look, we still got John Whittingdale there, haven't we now? And you think of others as well, Maastricht rebels. So I think that, to me, John got it wrong. I think he was a great prime minister, a great parliamentarian, but on Europe, fundamental. And where I think you came in, we had those 13 dreadful years with the most wicked individual for the Labour Party, Tony Blair, as far as I'm concerned, with the things that he did, followed on by Mr. Misery, Gordon Brown, but a little bit more straightforward than he was. I think, Bill, you consistently stuck at the issue. Okay, Ian Duncan Smith wasn't our leader. So when David Cameron got the leadership, and I wasn't supporting him initially, it was David Davis, but, you know, I was wrong about that. I think you, and there was a small band of you, your dogged determination, forget the minutiae of the detail, but saying, we want a referendum, we want a referendum. I just didn't think we'd get another referendum, but you stuck to it. You were dogged. And okay, you've mentioned the clerks and the chairman of Ways and Means and all the rest of it, but you weren't, because of your legal background, you weren't going to let them get away with it. No. So I thank you for that opportunity of having another referendum. And Fiona, David and George, let us have the referendum, which they did everything they could to make sure that it went the other way. They were shocked by the result. And Bill, I'm going to say this to you. I was. I thought we would just lose.
I thought we were going to win. But that's because I believe, do you know, David, I want to say something about this, because actually, you know, you can play a part as a catalyst for people, but actually you can't do it unless the people are behind you. And we started out in a position where they didn't really know quite what was going on until the rebellion of Maastricht took place. And that was a moment of truth. Then after that, they gradually got to understand it. Then they came to realize that everything about this Maastricht business was against the instincts and the traditions of the British people. So I always say the real reason why we won the battle over the sovereignty of the United Kingdom Parliament is because the democracy of the United Kingdom reflected what the people were thinking. Oh, gradually they moved and moved because the arguments were articulated. So people tried to shut me up and shout at me or whatever it happened to be.
They tried to believe you.
But if you believe in the things that matter for them, that's people, and my association were absolutely brilliant. They supported me from Maastricht right the way through. So I always think that really this is about the British instincts, the British traditions, our history, the fact that we've been so successful over centuries, both in global trading, but also in defending our country against, for example, fascism, and also against the manner in which other people have tried to take us over. And the British people have actually done this. So I would say, yes, very kind of you to mention about the consistency and the rest of it. And I have tried to articulate the argument in various ways, but really, in a nutshell, this is a massive, shall we say, boost to the British people who themselves decided to vote the way they did. And I'll tell you a little story. on the day of the referendum, I was in the Westminster Underground tube. I was going down the stairs, and somebody shouted across who was going up the escalator on the other side. And he shouted over to me. He said, "I'm a journalist, Bill. Can you just answer me one question? What's it like to have 17.4 million people behind you?"
Marvelous.
Oh,
Actually, if I can come in, if I could have a word in edgeways here. No. David, you sum this up in your book very well, because you actually say the general public respond to politicians who have convictions.
oh.
And that is absolutely right. And despite all the endeavours of the media to be cynical about politicians, people do see that there are many, many people in Parliament there because they want to make a positive difference, and they believe in something that can make a difference for the people they represent. And I would say that is something that I see time and again within the House. But David, I wanted to, you also touched on
Fiona,
Prime Ministers.
can I just come back on that though, because I think conviction politicians I absolutely applaud.
Yes.
So when Bill kept on with David Cameron, got the referendum, he didn't leave it there. He wanted to make sure that we saw the thing through under Theresa May. We won't go into too much detail.
Don't do that.
And Boris Johnson was the right man to see it all, and we've got a bright future again. But I do think, Fiona, that just in your field,
yes,
you can be in a minority, but just keep going at it.
Absolutely.
Keep going at it.
Absolutely.
And this is, of course, where Labour made a huge mistake, including the present leader. They didn't respect the will of the people. Sorry, I interrupted you, Fiona.
No, you're absolutely right. And what I was going to ask you about is, isn't actually the different prime ministers that you've survived, though you're on your fifth now. You've mentioned Margaret Thatcher. There was John Major, David Cameron, Theresa May. Now you're on to Boris, but you've also seen off a similar number of speakers, haven't you? You've been through, I think, the same number of speakers. There was Bernard Wetherill, Betty Boothroyd, then there was Michael Martin, and of course John Bercow. Now we've got Sir Lindsay Hoyle. Now the general public actually don't often realise what a pivotal personality the Speaker is in the House of Commons. Enormous influence. Enormous importance in terms of directing proceedings and discipline, and also ensuring that the atmosphere within the House is kept positive, whilst at the same time difficult issues are discussed, ensuring that those members who perhaps aren't as confident on their feet are given just as much a chance to speak as others. And you bring all this out in the book. So I'm really interested in you reflecting on maybe some of the characters who've been speakers that you've seen that many of us haven't. I would have loved, for example, to have been in the House when Betty Boothroyd was there as the only woman speaker.
Well, you are right, Fiona. It's such an important role, who's speaker. I just miss George Thomas, who was a great speaker. But Bernard and Nin Wetherill, they were a marvellous couple. Oh, they were so welcoming, kind, opened Speaker's House to everyone, truly remarkable people. And Bernard wasn't grand. He was just wonderful. I had a really soft spot for Bernard. And I used to like it when colleagues were thrown out of the House and the Sergeant at Arms had to escort them. It was fun, really. And of course, Bill and I were there when Nigel Lawson's budget was halted, when they all stood in front of the mace, and Ron Brown was slung out because he smashed the doors. But the Wetherills were...
Heather taking the mace off the...
Absolutely.
Yes, well...
Absolutely. But Fiona, Bernard, I think it's not understood. He was the speaker when we were working incredibly long hours, all-night sittings. When I think of the firearms bill, which was Douglas Hogg was the minister on it, and it was taken through the night, literally through the night. And not like now, the speaker, I mean, now they sort of share it between the speaker and the 3 deputies. Well, in Bernard Weatherall's day, the speaker used to take the chunk of it. He had wonderful stamina, and he was a smashing guy. Now, of course, after Bernard, it went to Betty. And in fact, I can see walking through the lobbies with Betty on the vote on the televising of Parliament, and she said, "I see, David, that you're not in favour of televised now proceedings.
Yes.
You'll have to persuade the House." Well, of course, she loved it and became a media personality. I'm not sure that I was entirely, her great friend was Gwyneth Dunwoody. I'm not sure that I was entirely Betty's cup of tea, but I see her from time to time now, and we have a lovely chat together. She was fair, and she was very firm with the Labour side, and she was greatly loved by all the officials, and she was pretty tough. That's what I would say. I mean, politically, I don't think Betty and I agreed on so many things, really. But she was, well, she became world famous for
Yes, absolutely.
her voice, and she was fair and she was firm. Well, after that, of course, we had Michael Martin, who was a complete contrast to both of them. I mean, other than being a fellow Catholic, I wouldn't say that I knew Michael so well, but he was very, very humble. I mean, he used to have a florid face, and I thought he drank, but he never touched 1 iota of alcohol at all. And he was very, very straightforward. And all I would say to Bill and Fiona, it was a tragedy the way his speakership ended, because look, I think the so-called scandal about what we were claiming and not claiming, did it end in any good at the end of it all? Absolutely no. I mean, we lost a huge number of colleagues. We've got another organisation in there running things which is costing a lot of money. And I think Michael Martin was probably just protecting what had been the good reputation of Parliament, which is going to take generations to recover from. So I think he had a very, very tough end. And of course, after that, we moved on to John. Now, I'm not going to get into detail about John, because I know he's not the most popular figure on our side. I knew John before he became an MP, and I was fortunate. I think he also treated Bill rather well.
Well, that's a very interesting, and I noticed that
I think he did.
Passing over to me on that. Can I say this thing?
Yeah.
One of the most extraordinary things is that there is a Bruges Group pamphlet, by which I mean, you know, for those who are listening to this, a really strong Eurosceptic organization called the Bruges Group. And he actually wrote a very, very important pamphlet, strongly criticizing the European Union for almost everything under the sun. I won't go into the detail. Actually, when he was doing his speakership, it was perfectly clear, and we were only talking about last year, 18 months ago now, actually the whole of that business with the paralysis of Parliament, and then the Hillary Benn Act, and, all this, and the advocacy of people like Kenneth Clarke were given a lot of credibility and a lot of time, and all the Remainers, as we call them, were given a huge amount of special time and treatment. On the other hand, and I have to say this, you're quite right, he did actually, and in his book, he does actually refer to this, he sort of puts Kenneth Clarke and me into a kind of category.
Yes.
That we were the exponents. In fact, we were like a couple of old war horses, if you really want the truth.
Yeah.
Ken being
very fond of you, Bill.
And also me being very much against. And we were given this opportunity to effectively clash with one another, which I think actually something that the speaker should allow to happen.
Yes.
You would get, for example, with Gladstone and Disraeli.
Yes.
So I think really you've got this kind of very controversial speakership, some of which I obviously didn't like, because obviously some part of it was to do with the Remain argument and the paralysis. On the basis of the cockpit of the nation, there was a real clash between the Eurosceptics and those who were in favor of the EU, and that was something that he did actually allow to happen.
Well, I would say, Bill, that two things that I admired about John Bercow were his photographic memory, if only I had a memory like that, and dare I say, his bladder control.
I thought you were
Now, anyone could sit in the... I mean, how's it done? I don't understand. I know he plays tennis, but but I would say, Fiona, I do really like Lindsay. Because it was his father who was an MP now in the
Doug, Warrington North, yes. Doug,
fabulous guy. We still talk to one another. I went on my first parliamentary trip abroad, and I mean, look, Lindsay is very humble, down to earth. I think he's fair, and I think he's a decent guy. So, but they've all been very, very different. And who knows what the future will hold for us, eh, Bill?
Absolutely right.
Now, I think it's your turn next, Bill.
Yes. What I would like to ask you is, what do you feel about your knighthood? Because you've been made Knight of the Realm. I was very privileged to be given the same. And all I can say is that I'm interested to know what it means to you and how you think it happened. That's a good question.
Bill, I can't believe you've asked me that.
I have.
Fiona listening and everyone else listening.
Question. This is something which I thought you'd be interested to answer.
Well, I'm going to do my best to try and answer it. But you see, Bill, this is not my last book. My next book is all on animals, called The For Love of Animals. And then I've got one after that, which is all about life. I'm only halfway through my parliamentary career. And the book which will go into the detail, my friend, that you've tempted me to go into will be when I've hopefully voluntarily left the building. As far as how you get a knighthood. But this is what I would say. Look, Bill, if you had told me that I would have got a knighthood in 1983, elected for Basildon, I would have thought, oh, for goodness sake, this isn't going to happen. And without question, when I was told that I was going to be made a knight, and my mother was still alive. I mean, she was over 100 then, and it's not everyone who gets there who's still got their mother alive. I mean, father was dead, to enjoy it. But it was wonderful. But I'm going to tell, this is something I'll share with both of you. I was going to be knighted on the day of the 2015 general election. So I phoned up Buckingham Palace, where the office is, and said, look, this is so important, and I'm thrilled about it, and everyone's thrilled about it, but I really have got to be in the constituency on the day of the general election. I mean, it just won't be understood. Entirely understood, sir. Now, you've got the choice of Buckingham Palace or Windsor. Bill's face. What would you like? I said, oh, well, look, I know I shouldn't ask, but I'd love it to be the Queen, and I'd love it to be at Windsor. The photographs are slightly better. So that's what I did. And we also had a little conversation about how many guests you could have there, Bill, as well. So wasn't I lucky? And it was done at Windsor. And we stayed overnight, and the Queen said, okay, David, you can come and stay with us in the castle if you want, but it probably won't look too good. Only joking, folks, in case someone listening to this thinks I'm serious. We stayed in a hotel, and I was just so thrilled early in the morning when the Royal Standard was flying from the castle. I said, I've got the Queen. And Bill, I want to hear about your experience, but I will never, never forget our car arriving at the start of the mile as you approach Windsor, and there were actually on duty a number of officers of our House of Commons who knew me, and it was the most special day imaginable. And before I shut up, the one amusing thing, Fiona, was the knights are taken to a separate room to be instructed about the kneeling and all that. And I thought, my God, this chap, he hasn't even bothered to dress up. Didn't have a clue who it was. It was John Hurt, who was wearing the same suit when he made that famous film. And he was a nice chap. But, Bill, it was so, so special. Never forget it.
Very interesting, this, because we've never had this conversation before.
No, we haven't.
You know something? I had exactly the same experience. And yes, because I wasn't because of the general election, but actually the opportunity was sort of presented as to what might be what I would most prefer if it were possible. And I said exactly what you said, and I said Windsor. And so both you and I have had this very special privilege of actually being knighted by the Queen and at Windsor. And I had an anecdote to go with it, which I'll just tell you.
Yeah, please.
Maggie Smith was getting the Companion of Honour on the same day.
I love Maggie Smith.
Wonderful, absolutely. And she's
Prime Miss Jean Brodie.
She's
fantastic.
Fun. And you remember Tea with Mussolini? Can you remember?
Yes.
And all these wonderful
things.
Anyway, we were being given a kind of prepping as to what you do. You know, you have to kneel down on special sort of kneeling chair and all that kind of thing. And the person who was giving us the prepping had done this so often that he talked very quickly. And I don't think Maggie Smith actually could hear him that well. So she turned to me and she said, I can't hear a word the man's saying. So I tried to intervene and say, well, will you do it again? Which he did, but it didn't seem to make that much difference. And so she said, what do you think I'm going to do? I said, you're absolutely perfect, Maggie. You'll be able to do this without any difficulty whatsoever. Just stick to your instincts and just do the right thing. And of course, it all went perfectly.
And Bill, I mean, I love Maggie Smith, who's now 87, but the photographs, Bill, that you have in Windsor, I'm sorry to say this, Fiona, so when you become a dame, and I hope you'll get a choice, and I do hope the Queen is still the Queen then. Do choose Windsor, because the photographs you get are much, much better than in the quadrangle at Buckingham Palace. They really, and also they give you a tour of the place, your own private tour afterwards, and you don't get alcohol, but you have some tasty water to Has it made any difference, Bill? I hope you can see somewhere in the book there is a picture of me on a horse.
Oh, good. Oh, great stuff. So you're
dressed up in armour and all that. It was just for a bit of fun. But Bill, aren't we lucky to have been honoured in that way? And my goodness, Fiona, I think the Queen is just incredible.
Absolutely.
Love the Duke of Edinburgh. My sort of person, same sort of sense of humour. And the Queen at 95, I just think we're so blessed. I mean, even your viewers will have seen this week that she's even still doing Zoom things. Just such an incredible woman. I think we're now going to, I don't want to bore the viewers too long, but before talking about the charities, can we go over to the last questions? Fiona.
Well, my last question is, what would you advise a young person wanting to become a member of Parliament today? Because this is a question that you probably get asked a lot. I get asked quite a lot when I go and talk in schools or I meet young people. And I think it's important that we encourage them to look at going into politics, particularly at a time when, as we've discussed earlier, perhaps the media perception of politicians isn't what it could be, because politicians and certainly members of Parliament work incredibly hard, many of them on a whole range of really valuable issues. And I'm thinking, for example, of all the all-party groups. I think there are over 400, aren't there, on any manner of things, from, well, cats to, you know, yeah, you're probably in that one, cats protection, to, you know, many different countries of the world where there are difficulties and challenges that our colleagues want to support. So what would your advice be to a young person who's thinking, I'd like to consider this in the future?
Well, Fiona, I tell it like it is. So I can be a bit negative, because this is going to horrify both of you, and Bill will have a different take on it. The way Parliament is now, I wouldn't start on the journey, because my experience over the past 4 decades, I think, is better than people coming in now. That's me. But because they haven't experienced anything differently, they all think it's wonderful. But hopefully, because what we've been discussing throughout the interviews, because of Brexit, we're getting power back. But, you know, to have lost more and more power, and I think so many colleagues come in to the House of Commons thinking that they can put the world right. And they can't just like that. So look, Fiona, I've got 5 children. I never encourage any of my children to go into politics, because they do pay a bit of a price for it.
Yes.
And you certainly don't make any money out of being a politician. You know, forget all that. But I think it goes back, Fiona, to something that you said earlier: conviction.
Yes.
I say to a young person, if you believe in something, then you fight for it. And the best stage of all is the House of Commons, if that's what you want. But I do point out to them the downside of it all. And, you know, your private life becomes very public. It's not for everyone. And yeah, I am going to say this, Fiona, the reason I love animals is animals aren't judgmental. As long as you feed them, they're always grateful for everything you do for them.
That's true.
Art, and we all know of our constituents who come to our surgeries, and you think, oh my goodness, get a life. And they can be very, very wearing. But yeah, I want the quality of our democracy to be as good as it ever was, and that's only going to happen for young people coming in for the right reasons. But I was against all female lists. I was against our party engineering particular people entering Parliament. I think it's got to be down to the individual, frankly. And this is why we've had a number of colleagues who've changed parties, got elected, started saying things against what they. I want people with convictions and to fight for the convictions, not just to follow what they think is the most popular.
David, first of all, I would like to pay tribute to Fiona, because she is, to me, every time it comes up, it doesn't matter what the subject matter. We had the Northern Ireland abortion business the other day. I just rang up my whip and I said, well, you know what I'm going to do, because and I'm with Fiona on this. You know? And the same with you, David. And I mean, the bottom line is that conviction politics, and also the determination, even when one's in a minority, to fight for it, is actually what it's all about. So yes, you were somewhat right, and you said you thought I might slightly disagree with you about what you'd say to the younger generation. But the point that I would make is that if we hadn't got Brexit, then I think we would have been on a continuing slide down a black hole, against the British people's instincts for democracy and tradition, and also from their great, enormous legacy of hundreds of years of fighting for the right reasons so that we would have a democratic system. And so the way I would summarize it in the advice that I would give to a new young person who was thinking about it, now you have an opportunity. We've got our sovereignty back. Yes, there are going to be a few difficulties on the way in the next year as it sort of settles down. But the great thing that you will be able to do, to go back to the beginning of this conversation, is that when David and I were going into politics for the first time, we had a sense of hope, and we believed that with conviction, we will be able to try and change things. And Fiona, you've done that too. So what I would say to you, and it's true, and I would say this isn't a self-congratulatory discussion, it's about what's really been going on in the last 20, 30 years. And I would simply say that for the future, instead of people sitting in European standing committees writing their constituency mail, now they've got an opportunity as individuals to carve out in the political forum of the nation a way to go forward to rebuild the tremendous opportunities that are there for the taking if we stand by our democracy, stand by our history and our traditions, and then do good in the world and in our constituencies and domestic politics. We have this huge opportunity as a result of Brexit, which is going to give the British people their self-government back. And I think that's the reason why a lot of them should be thinking very hard about going into politics, because now they can do things which were denied to a lot of people when we were stuck in the European Union.
Well, look, I'm going to say this to both of you, but Fiona, you said what advice I would give to young people. I would choose you two as examples to follow. You see, I remember everything and I do hold grudges, but you wouldn't know it. You two don't. I mean, you both have been insulted for your views. I would have lost it. I've never seen either of you be nasty to people.
David.
I've never seen any of you. I mean, all the flack both of you have got for your two different stands on things. But honestly, I've never seen either of you lose your temper or being nasty. But that isn't my case. Now, Bill, let's have the final question from your good self, because you are the birthday boy.
All right. What are you going to do, David? Because you're a young man compared to me. Now think about that. Because you said you were 7 away from being father of the house. Some people call me the grandfather of the house, because you may not. I'm now the oldest member of the House of Commons. Did you know that?
You don't look it. So, oh God.
Well, be that as it may, what I really would like to ask you, and I might have asked you this in the tea room, but as we've got this opportunity, I'm going to do it now. You are, I don't know what your age is now, but it's pretty young comparatively.
Well, I was born on the 26th of March, same as Fiona, but unfortunately after her, but I won't.
No, but in what year? What was your year of birth?
Well, if you read the book, it says 1952, I think.
I'll just tell you this. I was born on the 10th of May, 1940, and I tell you this. The day, as I was at 5:30 in the morning, as I was being born, right, Hitler invaded Holland, France, etc., and Churchill became Prime Minister that evening. Now, I have to confess, I didn't know anything about that at the time, but I can tell you it's very curious kind of.
That is wonderful.
So imagine my mother has my father, who's then age 25, down in Warminster doing his artillery training, and you can imagine what she must have thought. So it seems to me that you being such a young person, because you're 12 years younger than me, you got at least another 15 years to go. What are you going to do in the next 15 years?
Bill, imagine if Southend hasn't become a city by then.
Oh.
So, come on, my question. What do you think that you might, how much longer? I know that's an unfair question, but in the world that we're in, do you sort of feel, because we've got other elections to come, you've done a fantastic job for Basildon and also for Southend at the time. I mean, you are the epitome. If anybody ever asks me, who is the man who always has the right thing to say about his constituency every time he gets the opportunity, it's really not a city yet, though.
I know.
No, so you'll have to stay in the house. You've still got to achieve that.
I believe it'll come, but
yes.
I just wanted to tempt you into the possibility of telling me what you might do after the next general election, because you're only a young chap like Fiona, young lady.
Well, look, I'm going to keep going, Bill.
You're going to be father of the house.
It was our late colleague Eric Forth who donkeys years ago, when we used to, everyone elected Fiona in 1983, we used to have these dinners, and he predicted I would be the father of the house. But you know, you never know what's going to happen next, frankly. But it is my intention to keep going while I'm fit and able to. And the reason I say that, Fiona and Bill, I think that you do need still a few members in the House, because with the row about what we were claiming and not claiming, huge damage was done with the number of people who left that experience. Because if there aren't a few of us around to sort of say, okay, what about this? What about that? You can easily get into bad habits. I mean, look at the 2019 people. Fantastic, we've got over 100 new colleagues, but it hasn't been good for them, has it? We've had the pandemic, and they haven't really had a chance to get to know us all, learn about the house, etc. So, Bill, I want to keep going for a bit longer. But, you know, if my association and the good people of Southend West think that, oh, we're sick of him, we'll have a change, then so be it. But it is my determination to keep going. Now, look, both of you have been wonderful, absolutely wonderful. But before we finish, I wonder, Fiona, before Bill asked me about the male charity, I wonder if you'd like to ask me about one of my charities.
I would. I'd like you, David, to tell us, because the proceeds of the book are going to your charities, and that's very generous of you, because there's so much in this book. It's a wonderful book. It's, you know, over 260 pages, packed full of anecdotes and of history, and the time you must have put into it means it's extremely generous that you're giving all the proceeds or the profits to charity. And so one of them is Endometriosis UK. And I think it might help the listeners to know a little bit more about that and why you're so passionate about that particular issue.
Well, Fiona, even though I've got a wife, a son and 4 daughters, I'd never heard of endometriosis. But a constituent called Carla Cressy came along and explained what endometriosis was. And there are 1.5 million ladies suffering from this condition, including some of our female colleagues. And I think it was a illness that not enough people knew about. So we have an all-party parliamentary group, which is very, very active. And I'm delighted to say that we've now got it in the Department of Health strategy as a major priority to support people with endometriosis. So you're absolutely right that 1/3 of any profit will go to that particular charity. And of course, Fiona, Bill, you and I know that we chaps aren't quite as good at health problems and our ladies. So I think you want to ask me about another one of the charities.
Yeah, well, you've got 2, and I would like to know more about the Music Man project and also this Prost 8.
Yes.
I don't really know what that is, although I'm guessing it may be about prostates. I'm not quite sure.
It is.
Just to give me an insight into all that.
Well, again, another constituent was suffering from prostate cancer, and he, via this gene therapy, managed to overcome it, formed a local charity, and it's a play on the words, really, prostates, and supporting them as well. But Bill, you asked me about the Music Man project. Now, Fiona and Bill, we've all got constituents, some of whom, a tiny minority, have learning difficulties. And when I was first elected to Parliament, I was taken to South Ockenden, where they were looked after. I saw some of them in straitjackets. Can you believe it? Well, of course, all these years later, we treat them so differently. And a local constituent called David Stanley, wonderful deputy head of one of our local schools, together with his wife, who are both Salvationists, they decided through the power of music to transform people's lives, some of whom had severe learning difficulties. And how good is it? We've performed at the London Palladium. We then went on to the Royal Albert Hall. And if it hadn't been for the pandemic, we were going to go across the big pond and perform on Broadway and in Carnegie Hall. And that's going to be the next destination.
Well, I think that's remarkable.
Well, that they are absolutely fabulous, and now they're spreading much wider, and they're in all of our constituencies.
Marvelous.
It's good for dementia as well, so I understand.
Yes,
people
it
who
is.
can sing can actually hear the music and join in even when they can't communicate with words. So I absolutely applaud you on all three of your charities.
Well, Bill, it's a real tearjerker when you see youngish people who've got restraints in the chairs they're sitting on and to stop their heads banging, and you start playing the music and they can do wonderful, wonderful things and understand it. So it's marvelous. Well, look, ladies and gentlemen, I am just so grateful to Fiona and Bill for spending time with us this evening and putting me through our paces. If it seemed at one time it was a mutual loving, well, why not? I genuinely do like them both. I really do. And I think we share values. So, ladies and gentlemen, here's the book, Eyes and Ears, A Survivor's Guide to Westminster. You can get it on Amazon if you want. You can get it from Ian Dale. You can get it from Waterstones. You can get it from Foyles. You can get it from W.H. Smith. Please do buy the book because all the royalties go to the three charities. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for spending time with us this evening. And thank you, Fiona and Bill. Good night, everyone.
Goodbye.
This is my journey so far, where I was born, where I became a councillor, when I was first elected to Parliament, and where I am now the Member of Parliament for. Enjoy my journey. I hope you enjoy reading my book, Eyes and Ears, A Survivor's Guide to Westminster.